computer.
Welcome to another week's episode of Get Out Alive World. Today we have the beautiful, the phenomenal Jennifer Prisk. Now, I really wanted to do the introduction, but guess what? It's going to take a couple of years in order to do so. So guess what? I'm going to ask her to do an introduction because I guarantee you that she will get it done more faster than I'll do. Welcome, Jenni. How are you?
I am very well, thank you, Tracey-ann, and I'm delighted to be connected with you in my native New Zealand. So you and I are on two sides of the planet, and this is phenomenal because of our electronic possibilities. I was born and raised in New Zealand, and then spent 40 years after I married my husband living in San Diego in California. By profession, I am an executive speech coach and also a motivational speaker. And after 9/11, I founded Voices of Women, which now you know as iVow, which has become a podcast program, much as you have. And that's where we want to amplify the voices of women around the world, especially those who are in situations where perhaps they are being oppressed or suppressed, or they have suffered from forms of violence. And then I'm happy to say, though, that with regard to my life, COVID has forced us to stay in New Zealand a lot longer than we planned to, but I'm very happy to be back in my homeland again, my home country, and talking with you.
Awesome. Awesome. And I'm happy to have met you at that seminar. Totally something that I had not planned because I did not know anything about that seminar, and something popped up in my email and I decided I have to go. And hence I met you. What a phenomenal journey thus far. But talk to me about how you grew up. What happened in your childhood days? Were you always this person who advocates for persons? Were you always like that when you were growing up?
Well, that's a very interesting question. And looking back, I think perhaps I was a little bit without realizing it. Growing up in New Zealand is quite idyllic. It's a very beautiful country and it's a very easy life. We know that we are blessed and very fortunate here. And I grew up with an older sister, and she was married when I was 13. But going back to my school days, apparently on my first day of school, I was very upset about leaving my mother. I was 5 years of age. But when I looked around and I saw that some of the other children were more unhappy than I was, apparently I started taking care of them all and helping them to feel better and to feel safe and to feel happy about being at school. So I loved my school years. I didn't like the work, but I loved being with people. And I loved languages and I loved expression. And I loved the theatre. So I made those discoveries as I was growing up through high school. Now, on the sad side of things, unfortunately, my father was a pedophile and I was one of his victims. And I say this now through a sense of recovery and through a sense of strength, that when you grow up in a household where there is fear, it teaches you to become very resilient and to become I think more adult faster than you normally would, because you have to be watching out. And I know that you're familiar with this also. But mostly my childhood, and especially because of my grandmother, it was wonderful. She was the most beautiful woman and I really, really loved her. I loved my mom too a great deal, but my grandmother was she was like my guardian angel. She was absolutely terrific, full of life. And one of the things I remember about her was that even when she was in her late 70s, she used to go out and sing to old people. And I thought that was wonderful because I thought she was really old, but she had so much to give that I think she taught me a lot about giving back.
All right. Thank you so much for that. And what beautiful soul. Is she still here with us?
No, she actually died in my arms when I was 19 years old. She gave her, that was her parting gift to me, I think, because it was quite a gift, but I thought the world would end. I was so disturbed and distressed. Excuse me. So she's been gone a long time, but I still hear her.
Totally, I can just imagine.
Yes.
I can just imagine the love and the warmth that she gave you. It's really great. Now, she died in your arms at the age of 19. Was that when you decided that I'm gonna tread on to this journey? Was that when you decided that, you know, this is the path that I'm going to take?
Not immediately. That's a very interesting question. But what I did do 2 years after she died was get on a very big ship, and it took 5 weeks at sea, and I sailed from New Zealand to England.
Wow.
And I decided to travel because she had always wanted to travel the world and never could. And I think there was an impetus in her conversations with me. And so I sailed to England. I had one other friend on board the boat. We had a bed and breakfast to stay at when we arrived, but then we had to start everything from scratch. So I had to find a job, I had to find a place to live, and I had said to my parents, I'll just go for a year. And I ended up staying for 3 years while I traveled Europe and did about 80,000 kilometers all over the countryside. And I got a tremendous insight into how the world lives, the world other than New Zealand. And I think that that's when it started to penetrate in my brain of how many exciting opportunities there were to work with people, and especially women, in the world. So that was an amazing experience.
At what age did you start, though? How old were you when you started advocating for women?
That's interesting. I was actually I was in my 40s. I think I'd always been trying to do it. I'd always tried to support, especially women, anybody who I knew was struggling in any way, in my own way, but without an organization. But the advocacy really started when I founded Voices of Women, and it was 9/11 in New York City that prompted me to start 9/11. To start Voices of Women. And I was caught in Seattle. My home is in San Diego, but when the airplane struck the World Trade Center, I was working in Seattle and I couldn't get home for 4 days. And that gave me a lot of time to think about what's going on with the world. We need more peace. We need more women at the peace tables and the negotiation tables. So I started to think about Voices of Women. I contacted some friends in San Diego and I said, this is what I want to do. Are you with me? And they all said, yes, we are. So I actually talked to them from the car on the way home on the long drive from Seattle to San Diego. And that was how the idea for a nonprofit or an NGO started.
Awesome. Awesome. Tell me about IVO. What are some of the things that you do at IVO? I know you said you advocate for women, but what are some of the other things that you do at IVO?
That's another lovely question. So let me start off with the beginning. So it was Voices of Women, or VOW, that started first after 9/11. So we had our first meeting 1 month after the Trade Center buildings fell down. We had our first meeting because I was determined to start quickly. So we started in October of 2001. And over the 15 years that we ran as a nonprofit organization, our advocacy was about supporting women at that stage in Afghanistan and in Iraq and in Africa. And we had about 80 educational programs which were open to the public. And we had speakers who were living in America, but they were from those respective countries. And they updated us with very, very important information so we could learn more about what was actually happening in these countries that were being afflicted by war. And so for 15 years, we ran the nonprofit. And then when we realized that a number of the board directors had to resign, and I was getting very busy with my business, Prisk Communication, we turned it from a nonprofit into a podcast program, and that's iVow. And iVow was founded so that we could actually listen to the real voices of women, which is what the vow stands for. And the idea is to amplify the voices of women who are either working in marginalized countries, but they're in leadership roles, or to talk to women who are in fields and professions dominated by men, so that they could talk about how they get on and how they've learned to partner. They're very positive stories, they're not negative stories. They're all very positive.
Right. And I had the privilege of listening to some of those podcasts. And let me tell you something, people, you need to go and listen to some of them. If not some, all of them. Because guess what? You will hear from the persons who had first-hand experiences on some of the very same things that we're experiencing here. So I encourage you to go listen to those podcasts. It's called IVOW, iVow, right?
Yes, but let me give you the website, if I may, Tracey-ann. Sure. It is www.voicesofwomen, that's all one word and plural, voicesofwomen.org. And that's
awesome.
where iVow will pop up for you.
Awesome. Now, what are some of the challenges that you have experienced thus far while advocating for women, and how did you overcome some of those?
There are always, as you know, a lot of challenges. Probably the biggest one is getting funding. Now, having founded Voices of Women and iVow in America, you'd expect that it might be easy to get funding. And we did have some very, very kind and very generous donors who supported us, and we were able to get some grants. But funding often seems to be the most challenging. And once you've established a funding channel or a funnel, then things can get easier. The second thing was often that people would push back about our ideas. And I'm sure you understand what that means to the work that you do. They start to tell you, oh, you'll never get that done. Or what's a bunch of women going to do? You can't change the world. Or they would negate any of the things that we were proposing. They would push back against us. And so that gave us an ability, though, to get stronger, to grow a lot more resilience. And then, of course, the hardest thing for me became that as we learned about one group of women who were struggling somewhere in the world, that would open the door to learning about another group who was struggling somewhere else. And then that started to get overwhelming for me as I learned just how many people were struggling in their various countries. And of course, paramount to that was refugees, which is what we're seeing with Afghanistan at the moment. And to see all the internally displaced people in the world, that was a very challenging one. But to overcome, yes, I would say those three things: the funding, the naysayers, and then just that solid, that constant appearance of other people who needed help.
Totally. How did you overcome those obstacles? Because I know, firstly, for the funding, that's a very tough one. And when it is that you have persons saying to you that you won't be able to achieve all of these things that you really want to, you knowing in the back of your head that I have a solid plan and this can work, afford us the opportunity and we'll prove it to you. How did you convince those funders that you worked with to invest in you?
I started it because my background is public speaking, and because that's what I do for a profession. I would get on as many platforms as I possibly could, and I would tell the story of the women and the girls and the young people that we were supporting. And when you can learn to speak from heart to heart, it makes such a difference. It doesn't need to be about all the statistics, although they need to be included because people need proof. But it was mostly about the stories. And so I would tell the stories of the women and the girls that we were supporting, and that change the hearts and the minds of some of our donors. And that made it much more effective. So that's what I recommend for anyone, is to find your platform and speak endlessly about what the needs are and have them believe in you and trust you. And when that develops, then you can get your funding much more easily. And I know you're already doing that, Tracey-Ann. You do that.
Totally.
Yes.
Totally. I totally concur with that. Speak from your heart. Always speak from your heart, and everything will flow bountifully afterwards. Because if it is that you're doing something and it's not coming from your heart, it's easier for someone on the outside to look and say it's not coming from your heart. It's so easy for them to see. So I concur with you on that. Speak from your heart. Yes. Always.
And tell the stories. I remember when I worked in Africa, in Kenya, and I met a young girl, and she was one, of course, of thousands who was living in poverty. Now, I could have talked about the statistics of the poverty, how many people, where the regions are, but what I did instead was choose to tell her story. And by telling her story, it brought it to a very real place for everyone. I said where she was living and how she was living, and how her meals for the day were one potato, and that the clothes she had were actually boys' clothes because they couldn't find any for a young girl. And so telling those things became more of the heart story than dozens and dozens of statistics about the whole of Africa. I brought it right down to one little girl.
Right, that's so true. And I must commend you for doing that. That's not a lot of persons really know the psychology of doing that, because when you can use a story to have investors invest in you, yes, that speaks volume. So I must commend you for doing that. All right, my other question to you, or some of those investors who you would have convinced with those stories that you told them, or some of them who invested into vow and believing passionately into your dreams and aspirations?
Did you ask me? I apologize, for who they were or how?
No. Who are some of the investors who believed in you?
One of them, first of all, thank you for clarifying. And it was, they gave us money in kind, if you like. The Joan B. Crock Institute for Peace and Justice in San Diego, it's based at the University of San Diego, has a beautiful building with a theater in it for commentaries, for panels, for presentations about peace and negotiation, and about resolutions for women and for men, for the world. And what they did for us was we asked actually if we could partner with them and bring them programs, and they said yes. So they didn't specifically give us money or write us checks, but they gave us their auditorium for free, which gave us a platform to bring all of our programs in there. And we partnered with them for the whole duration of the 15 years that Voices of Women was running before we turned it into the podcast. Now, even when we started the podcast, they have a recording studio, and I asked, and for no charge, they allowed us to interview the women in their recording studio. So it was a continuing partnership. So it's not always that you're looking exactly for the dollars or the money in your community. It's that you're looking for the partners who will give you things in kind, which actually might take you further, as it did for us, because Voices of Women became very well known in the community because people came to the Institute and then they heard our programs. That was wonderful. And then we partnered with a lot of other peace and women's organizations in San Diego, and they gave us name recognition, they gave us partnering, and they also gave us places for free. So I just would encourage your listeners and your viewers that it's not always about getting the actual dollars in your bank account. It's the gold that is in the community to partner with and what they can provide for you.
Totally. And I agree with you. What does success looks like for VOW? What does it look like? Can you share one of your success stories? Because I know you have a lot of them. Can you share one of your success stories with us?
Well, I think probably one of the success stories was that because we had built the reputation with the actual NGO Voices of Women, when we started iVow, a lot of people in San Diego and beyond were quite happy to come and speak to us. So one of our successes was actually to speak to 4 women in California who are in the political world, but they had beaten out men. And I'm not putting men down. We have to do this together. But what they had done was they had won their electoral votes over the men, and they were running very high office. One of them, in fact, is the president pro tem right now of the California Senate, Senator Toni Atkins. Another was a congresswoman. And that was one of our big successes was A, they believed in iVow, in the program, and 4 of them offered to be interviewed to talk about the changes that they had made. Now, 2 of the women were gay or are gay. And so they had double the situations to talk about, not only to win in their electorates, but also as gay women, because they were ostracized, they were put down. One of the congresswomen told me, she was married, that when she went to Washington, D.C. to be sworn in as a senator, her husband was with her, and everybody who came into the office spoke only to him and not to her because they thought he was the one who was taking up office. And they just ignored her because she's a woman. And so it was these are the sorts of stories we wanted to get out. I think the success also has been, so it was the political women, but it was also the women peacemakers who used to come and live in residence at the Institute for Peace and Justice. And because they came from around the world, from the front lines of war or from the front lines of chaos in their villages or in their towns, and they would tell us the story. They, to me, are the success of iVow. And where do I want it to go? I'd love to get every woman I know on that program, especially women like you, Tracey-Ann, who are working hard to support others. So that's is to get it on a very big national program. Totally. Or international, actually, not just national, international.
Right. And I know this other question, it's intertwined with the previous one I asked you, but what's one of your greatest achievements to date? Because I know a lot, but what is one of your greatest achievements to date?
It's a lovely question, and I've always preferred to stay humble if I can and not really talk about, achievements. I think looking back, there are 2, if I may. One was founding my my business, Prisk Communication, from scratch and building that into an international speaking platform. That was one, because I started it with not a great deal of knowledge and right from the beginning. And as you know, now I gave one of the workshops for the Commission on the Status of Women's meeting at the United Nations, which they do annually, but we had to do it online, and that's how you and I met, which was a blessing for me. So it would be my business, but it would also be Voices of Women. The fact that we started that from absolute scratch, there were 10 of us that just pulled a board together, and somebody found a place for us to meet. And we started allocating roles to everybody around the table. And then we started our partnerships, and then we started advocating for women on the global or in the global community. So I think my business and Voices of Women.
Awesome. And let me tell you something. When you hear her speaking about international speaking coach, you definitely need to book a consultation. You're still working on that, right?
I am. I should be. You can see my hair's gone very gray. I'm almost 3 now, and but I just can't stop working as long as women need me. I'll be there. And actually, just as a quick note for that, since I came to New Zealand, we have an Indigenous race here, the Maori. And it's always been a dream of mine to work with Māori women. Well, I've partnered with 2 women where I live in the very north of New Zealand, and we have started an initiative, and we are now meeting with women leaders who are feeling very isolated, and we are coaching them, we are mentoring them, and we're supporting them. And the group is doubling in size. We're just with about 25 women now. We started with 12, and we're working on leveraging them and making their voices heard, but also helping them in their leadership journey. So that's an excitement to be able to be sharing the platform in New Zealand as well as in California.
That is phenomenal. That is, and when you speak of passion, I'm not sure if you are hearing it in her voice, but I am hearing it in her voice. She speaks with exuberance. She speaks with passion. It's inevitable for her to help others. And I want to say thank you so much for taking care of them. And the grays makes you more beautiful. Don't you even think about them. It makes you more beautiful. And I know that your blessings will be overflowing. Right? So thank you so much for helping other women who are definitely in need of your assistance. And that segues into another question that I have for you. What's next for Vol? Because I know you said you want to take it to an internet. It's already to an international level. But what's the other big step for Vol? Because you are now working with other phenomenal women across the world. What's next for Ivo? What's that next big project that you have waiting to unleash?
Oh, well, that's a wonderful question. It's something that I have thought about for many, many years. I would like to turn the podcast ultimately, and I'm not sure whether I can do this. The plans are very, very basic. I would have always wanted to turn it into a round table on television, so that viewers actually get to see the women as they're telling their stories. They may be sitting in national dress, which I always encourage. They may have hijabs on, which people have to see and discover the woman underneath, because I've worked a lot in the African countries. And so my dream would be to turn iVow into not just a platform for voices, but a platform for people, and have them speaking their stories in that situation. But the other thing I will tell you that I think you know a little bit about, and it's not specifically about iVow, but I have just finished writing a book, and it is a self-help memoir covering the 7 decades of my life, and it will be published before the end of this year. And it's written specifically for women, and it's called Stand in Your Spotlight. And then the subtitle is An Ode to Living Fully.
Wow.
So your viewers may want to, or your listeners may want to take note of that name, because it will be on Amazon by the end of 2021.
All right, great. And as soon as that is made published, I'll be one of the first persons to purchase one of those. Totally. I need to have that on my bookshelf, because you have blessed me so much. I'm not sure if you have the slightest idea of how much of a blessing you are in my life. And I want to let persons know to cherish those persons who you come in contact with. Cherish those persons who God has blessed you with. It's not by chance that we met. Never by chance, right? And I'm so grateful, so appreciative of that very day that I met you. I'll forever cherish that. And when I say that I love you, I literally mean that I love you. I love you endlessly. And another thing that I encourage persons to say, don't wait until something happens to the person next to you to tell them how much you love them. Tell them right now how much you love them, how much you adore them. Say it from your heart. And every day I'll say to you, I love you. And it's coming from my heart. I really do.
I know.
All right.
I know that it is. You've just given me the most beautiful hug because it's been a blessing for me to meet you, and I share that love with you.
Thank you so much. All right. What advice would you give to young women or young men who are passionate about advocacy? They don't know where to start, but they would really love to start. What advice would you give to them?
When you're passionate about something, it's hard to push it down. It stays in your brain. I know how it has with you, Tracey-ann, with your organization and the work that you're doing. So you must be sure, first of all, that your passion is there and it's strong. And you must know why your passion is there. Why are you founding or starting something? Who is it for? What's the big vision? And then what's the mission of that idea? The next thing I recommend is that you start local. That's exactly what we did with Voices of Women. Help the people in your own community, find out who's struggling. We did that in tandem with hearing from women from Afghanistan and from Iraq. We were also looking around the San Diego community and saying, where are the homeless women? How can we help them? So the idea for advocacy is that you start small and start local. And once you've determined what your dream is, you research it if you have access to the internet. You tell everybody in your circle what you want to do. You make sure that all the people who are important to you know what you want to do. We sometimes forget to even tell our own families what we're doing, and they're often the most important because they will get so excited. But when you start telling people outside or in your circle, but then you start moving outside, that's when your idea grows. So just as you and I had a connection this week, I'm going to share the one with the Mirabel Organization for Domestic Violence in Nigeria. So here is something that happened that might be of interest to your listeners, in that because I know the wonderful work that Tracey-ann does, when something popped up on my Twitter field about the Duchess of Cornwall in England was funding, or she'd become the patron of the Mirabel organization in Nigeria, as soon as I saw that, I sent that clipping straight away to Tracey-ann and I said, look what they're doing. What could you do? Can you partner? Because Tracey-ann doesn't waste a moment of her beautiful energy, within minutes, I had a copy of a letter that she had written to the Mirabel organization saying, we're here, we are in Jamaica, how can we partner? So this is what I suggest. You start small, you start locally, but you've got to be watching all day long for the connections for that organization that you're working to find. And I know that's why Tracey-ann will be successful, because she takes every opportunity that's addressed to her. And sometimes they're exhausting, sometimes they're heartbreaking, sometimes they don't come to anything, but you must never stop.
Totally. And thank you so much for that. And thank you for always looking out for the opportunities for us here. I so much appreciate you. And let me tell you something. When I say I'm going to do something, I am going to do it. And when I said earlier that it's not by chance that we met, I know it's not by chance, it was destined to happen, because the same approach that I took with writing that letter, I know for a fact that had you had that opportunity when it is that you are starting your organization, you would have done the same thing. You would have jumped on it right away. So I know once it is that you send me something, I'm going to jump on it. I'm going to get it done right at that moment, because sometimes that's the opportunity. If you waste a minute, sometimes it slips away within the wink of an eye. So it's always best to go at it right there and then. Now, if someone is listening to you, and I know there are a lot of persons listening and watching right now, how can they get in touch with Jennifer Prisk? And I want you to include your coaching business on as well, because it's not just about vow or I vow. I want you to speak specifically about the coaching platform that you have, because I know that I am going to be one of your students very soon. I didn't want to say it to you as yet, but I know that I will be one of your students very soon. And let me tell you something. Let me just give you a little secret, viewers and listeners. I wrote a letter once and I was kind of hesitant about it. And believe me, I sent it to Jenni. And guess what? She loved it. Even though I was hesitant about it and I had some doubts, let me tell you, I sent it there and she loved it. I mean, she loved it. And when I tell you that she has a touch for details, I mean, she definitely does. She has her eyes for details, anything at all. She will find that she will guide you right there. So I can tell you, you need to get info about the coaching. If it is that you're aspiring to be a speaker, I am aspiring to be a speaker. I have a lot more to cover, a lot. This is just the surface of it. And she's going to help me on that path, right? So get in touch with her and let me tell you, she'll be a blessing to you. So provide them with your coaching business, the information for that firstly, and then I vow.
All right, thank you. Well, my business is very simple. It's just Prisk, my last name, prisk.com. So that takes you straight to my website. Now, here's a disclaimer. I've been so blessed over the years with getting all my clients by word of mouth that I haven't had to worry about updating my website. So it is rather dated. I mean, it's not irrelevant, but you can find out at prisk.com more about what I do. And then I gave you the iVow, that's the voicesofwomen.org. And then also I am on Facebook, so just at Jenni Prisk. And I'm also on LinkedIn for any of you who may be on LinkedIn. And that's just simply, you would type in Jenni Prisk, my name, and you would, my LinkedIn profile will come up. And on Facebook, what you'll see at the top, the photo at the top, is me with my arms almost around 4 beautiful women peacemakers. That's my masthead on my Facebook page. And so I hope you'll take a look at that. So that's the best way to reach me.
Awesome. Thank you so much for that information. And with that said, we have come to the end of another journey just for today, but you will hear a lot more from her. And I trust you will go connect with her, whether on LinkedIn, on Facebook, go on her website. I know you will, if it's even 10 to 15 persons, I know that you will go and connect with her to do her coaching program. You'll be blessed. You will be blessed. Take it from me. I didn't start here. So trust me, she will help you as well. So thank you so much for gracing us with your beauty, with your brilliance. It's a pleasure connecting with you as always. Thank you so much for the work that you have continued to do with beautiful women and men as well across the globe, because we cannot do it without the men. We cannot do it without the men. So thank you so much. And thank you to all the partners who have invested in you, whether it be monetary investing or, you know, with facilities, whatever it is. We are indeed thankful and grateful to you for having chosen her to invest and touch lives, impacting lives. So thank you again. It was a pleasure having you. Always a blessing. Anytime, any day, anywhere. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Tracey-ann. Thank you. And those sentiments are returned.
Thank you.
So just